Hello, good morning, everyone. And for those who are watching us or who will be watching us on a replay, good afternoon or good evening. And if if you are new in our platform, I just wanted to introduce myself shortly and why we're doing this. My name is Marilyn. I'm the founder and CEO of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited, or CTS, and we are passionate about helping leaders and organizations who are continuous learners and action takers to transform and thrive in all aspects by co-creating, contextualizing, and customizing programs with the help of our world-class resources. We have served over 3,000 leaders from over 30 countries in different industries, including Petronas, Sony Mobile, ProLife UK, Ayala Group, Chevron, Tencent, Jollibee Foods Corporation, Legato, and Shell, to name a few. The reason why we are organizing several interventions, including this interview, is to help leaders who don't know how to stay relevant and adapt to the next normal, those who find it stressful to lead and ensure performance of a hybrid team, and for those who are afraid that they can't keep their team or their business. So, to stay relevant and lead more effectively in any situation, do join us in this interview. And again, an invitation for everyone watching us live to join us in the conversation as well. And today, it's my great pleasure to introduce our leader for the day, Alok Bhatia, or Dr. Alok, has over 30 years of experience in the chemicals, pharma, and agrochemical industries. He has worked and consulted globally with Fortune 500 companies such as DuPont, Huntsman, Johnson and Johnson, Corteva, among others. He has led businesses globally and understand the digitalization of supply chains. Over the past 3 years, he has helped increase revenues, reduce cost, redesign global supply chains, coach and trained leaders on diversity, equity, and inclusion in Asia Pacific. And he is married and loves walking, food, reading, and learning new things. His current passion is to use AI to improve business outcomes. So, without so much further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Alok. Hello, Dr. Alok.
Hi, Marilyn. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I hope I live up to that.
I hope I have actually introduced you well enough. I mean, based on your experience and what you have done so far, I'm sure the introduction I did is not enough to to
Oh,
justify.
no, it's good. Very good. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd like our audience to benefit so much from this conversation. So I'd like to start with by asking you to share with us your leadership experiences, influencers, leadership styles, and if you have like a favorite influencer you'd like to make mention, please do so. And before that, I actually missed to inform our audience how we actually get to know each other. We've been connected on LinkedIn for like what, 5 6 years or
Yes.
more. Yeah, and recently we've met each other and had a
Right.
really great conversation around D&I, around leadership, and what we both do in the consulting space, right? So yeah, so please go ahead and share with us your experiences or leadership experiences.
So I think my leadership experiences started fairly early in my career. I was given the responsibility of getting ISO 9000 certification for a manufacturing site. And I had to deal with a cross functional team. Nobody reported into me, but I had to influence, and I had to influence very hard to make sure that we cleared the audit. So that was my first experience. Subsequently, then I was leading the global R&D development, application development for a particular segment, and then I moved to South Asia as the country manager for my business, for the business that I was running. And throughout that entire journey, I learned a lot about how to influence people,
Mm-hmm.
how to set direction, how to follow up, how to make sure that things are getting done on time, and if there was any conflict, to deal with that conflict, et cetera, et cetera. So, and some of my favorite leaders that I've tried to follow have been, I read a lot about Jack Welch because he was at that time doing a lot of good things with GE. Also read a lot about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is
Mhm.
my favorite leader because he has been able to, or he was able to um, develop products that were so simple and easy to use. So
Yeah.
he removed a lot of the hesitation in buying some of the digital products, which I thought was admirable, and it shows up in the size of the company and how well Apple has done. So Apple has been a company that I've admired a lot during my years in industry.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience with us, and it's good to know that you've started being a leader, even though, as you've mentioned, and it's interesting because you've mentioned like I don't have any people under me, but I have to
Yes,
influence others. So that just reminds us all that it's not really about just having followers. It's all about also leading yourself and being able to influence others.
yes,
This and it doesn't matter whether you are in position yet or not yet, right? So
yes,
thank you for reminding us that. And I mean, we have Jack Welch and Steve Jobs are some of my favorite, or my leaders or influencers that I
mhm,
look up to as well. And again, you've mentioned around simplicity,
yes.
and that's our aim as a leader, right? And as a solutions provider as well.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing that. And having said that, sharing your favorite, your influencers, and your experience as a leader. What is leadership for you?
So for me, leadership is multiple things. But the first thing that a leader has to do is to lead. And what that means is to set up a strategic vision, a strategic direction, and then make sure that people are aligned behind that.
Mhm.
But having a strategic vision and not being able to execute is just wishful thinking. So
Mhm.
the leader not only has to develop the strategic vision, but they also has to make sure that the vision gets executed. Obviously, executing without a vision, you could end up anywhere. There's no direction to what you're doing. So both are equally important, and the leader has to follow
Yeah,
that. The second thing is that the leader has to accomplish things through other people. So therefore, sometimes actually a leader can be a follower as well.
exactly.
I learned a lot from the people who reported into me around sales and marketing when I came back into South Asia. They taught me a lot about how the markets work in India. So
Mhm.
sometimes a leader has to follow as well. Uh, but part of the handling people is also performance management,
Mhm.
dealing with issues that might show up that could derail the business, looking ahead to see if there's a continuous, access, continuous development of new customers, new revenue streams. So those are some of the things that a leader does. And also, as I was telling you earlier, we
Mhm.
live in a VUCA world. It's highly volatile, uncertain, changing, and ambiguous. So, therefore, change management and the ability to change and learn new things is a very important skill that a leader must develop. Otherwise, they won't be able to solve some of the business issues that keep arising. So, for example, in supply chain today,
Mhm.
there's a major disruption because of the pandemics. The disruptions due to political differences and opinions between different countries. The tariffs are changing. You have climate change. You have customer behavior changing. You have technology. Digitization is coming in rapidly. AI is coming in rapidly. So a leader has to be able to navigate all these changes as well.
Exactly. And I remember that conversation we had in a session last time where they said like leadership is about being able to um, lead during crisis. That's the most
Yeah.
critical part of being a leader, is being able to actually handle um, difficult situation. And like what you've said, we're living in a VUCA world, and leaders must be able to embrace and actually adapt to the changes that are happening. And like what's interesting is that in the last 2.5 years that we have been having the pandemic, I mean,
Mhm.
the changes have been like faster than usual.
Yes.
If you would agree with
Yes.
that. Yeah. And speaking of that next normal that I was referring to, I mean, some people don't believe in next normal. Some would call it new normal, and I would like to call it next normal. And probably it could be like the new hybrid setting. If I, if we can, if we have to, like, come up with um like how we will describe or how we will like address it. So in your case, based on your experience, especially in the last 2.5 3 years, how would you define or describe the new normal or next normal?
So I think the new normal is really to a great extent a continuation of what are the changes that have been happening. One of the big changes that has been happening is digitalization. There have been rapid changes in technology. You now have blockchain coming in, cryptocurrency. You have things like Industry 4.0. So there's rapid change showing up. And the reason why you need to stay on top of the rapid changes, in addition to technology, your environment is changing, right? The threat of pandemics has gone up significantly, and that can place strains on your supply chain and therefore being able to meet your customer needs. Because
Mhm.
of these pandemics, customer behavior itself has changed, right? So people are going off online and then maybe procuring offline, and therefore the systems have to match up.
Mhm.
If somebody is buying online and wants to go and purchase it from a store, then there has to be a coordination between all of that. So that's the technology part. The environmental piece, we all know about the Russian-Ukraine war. There are tensions going on all around the world. In Asia, a large portion of your shipping goes to the Malacca Straits, and also in the South China Sea. Tensions there can slow down shipping, slow down delivery of goods. So the new normal is really an extension. It's going to be a speed up of changes that are happening already, and there's more to come with artificial intelligence. Although artificial intelligence is already part of our lives, we
Mhm.
don't often realize it, but it's there in the way we when we search on Google, when we get involved with customer service with the client, chat bots, etc. It's there on our mobile phones. So AI is already there, but it's going to get accelerated. Is actually because there are significant productivity advantages that show up with AI. One thing I do want to point out is that with all these changes happening, one of the key things that enables a leader to be able to adapt to these changes is to be able to get a sense of what is going to happen over the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. You probably can't, and maybe over 5 years. Now, obviously, further out you go, you cannot, your forecasting is not going to be great. But it's important to start looking at that so that you can start adjusting yourself personally, your team, and your organization for those potential changes that are coming. One of the key things that a leader has to do is not only deliver results today, but also prepare for tomorrow. So, the things that need to be done today in order to deliver results tomorrow, this year, next month, next quarter, the following year, the following quarter, etc., all that have to be taken into account. So, you have to deal with the short term and long term simultaneously.
Yes, I love how you've actually shared that with us. And again, it's all about not really like, well, it's kind of difficult to say that, knowing all those changes or the future or what is yet to come, right? But at the same time, like, being able to like adapt and to
Yeah,
somehow forecast or like be able to prepare and be ready for those changes that are
yes,
yet to come, like what you've said. And yeah, it's and that all requires learning and adaptability, obviously, right? And
yes,
leadership has a huge role to fulfill in order to have a successful change management and adaptability within the
that's right.
organization as well, right?
That's right. That's right.
so so, from your experience as a corporate leader and now working with corporate leaders as well, what would you say would be the top three problems that they normally phase. I mean, you've made mention a bit about the adaptability and being able to handle change management in our earlier conversation. But if you were to summarize, whether it's during the pandemic or even pre-pandemic, what would you say would be the top three problems that leaders do face?
So, in my view, I think one of the big issues in corporates today is actually a lot of stress because of all these changes going on. So, in fact,
Mhm.
mental health is a very critical issue. When we have dealt with clients, employees routinely will tell us about the mental stress that they're going through. So
Mhm.
corporations have to help employees deal with that mental stress, and there are two parts to that. One is, of course, helping them with their own individual behavior, and the second thing is also the organizational behavior, culture, etc. That can help an employee. We are not going to stop changes. Changes are going to come, and there'll be changes that you will not be able to predict. And so, therefore, the ability to change, ability to adapt, to build that resiliency is going to be very important as well. So, mental health, building that resiliency to change, and lastly, it's also about health. It's about taking care of your own health, and
Mhm.
therefore, things like providing support to employees in terms of diet, advice on diet, advice on
Mhm.
sleep, advice on exercise, etc., are all going to be very important in order to help the employee stay as productive as possible. The
True.
other trend that has started is something called quiet quitting, which has now started to show up on a lot of the in the media, is where people are starting to do the bare minimum that's required as part of their jobs. Whereas, in fact, for a company to thrive, they need everybody with all hands on deck, bringing the best ideas. And finally, the culture has to be one where it promotes debate. It promotes out of the box thinking. It's a culture where people recognize their own biases, because everybody's biased, by the way. There is
Mhm.
nobody who's not biased. Even
Mhm.
good people are biased. It's important to recognize those biases and to recognize how those biases shape our thinking. So if you have a very strong leader, you will notice that people in the room will follow what the leader says, but the leader may not know everything.
Mhm.
And so it's very, very important to hear voices that are completely different from yours. There's something that we've called diversity of opinion. You have to allow for that diversity of opinion. So I think these are some of the challenges that are showing up, apart from the issues with supply chain, with handling the risks that come with running companies and teams, etc. Those are some of the things that I would put forth to you.
Wow, thank you so much for summarizing that with us. And again, one of the silver linings that the pandemic has brought about is really around the consciousness, or like mental health not being a taboo. Like, I mean, we have
Yes,
to accept it. I mean, we are human, we have to be integrated, and we are
yes,
interconnected as well. And
yes,
it's always having that balance of taking care of your mind, body, and soul, as key to having that balance. And again, stress is not all bad as well, right? I mean, we've
no,
all heard of that. Like, sometimes actually stress help us to perform better, right? And
yes,
again, it's not all bad. But if you have like a different stress where it's like it's been there and it's stopping you to do things,
yeah,
or limits you, then that's when you really have to address this. And it's interesting because in my last interview as well, I he made mention about quiet quitting. And and I learned something different from you, based on our conversation, which you were saying it's really more of like more employees are just offering or doing their bare minimum. It's generally what I understood from the last conversation is really about employees being disengaged, especially now that
yes,
most organization are on a hybrid setting, right? Like not everyone is like in the same location while working.
Yes, yes, absolutely. If you want to get employee engagement, there are three or four key things you have to do. First of all, you have to recognize that diversity is a fact. There
Mm-hmm.
is no getting away from it. Even if you look at Mother Nature, you
Mm-hmm.
see the amount of diversity that is there. So, therefore, you will get diversity of opinion
Mm-hmm.
from your team. The second thing is to be inclusive. There are people in your organization who are introverts who may not speak up. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important for a leader to reach out to those people as well, to reach out people who may have a different point of view. And that inclusion is what then ultimately leads to engagement. So if you think about it, if you don't feel included in a chat group,
Mm-hmm.
say on WhatsApp, will you post messages? Unlikely,
Oh.
right? You're not going to be engaged with that group. So it's important that a leader draws people in and make sure that they are included. The other thing I want to point out around this quiet quitting and stress and mental health, yes, a little bit of stress is important, gets you moving. Too much chronic stress can lead to a
Chronic.
lot of health problems. It can lead to
Exactly.
cardiovascular issues, etc. Lack of sleep, by the way, can lead you to pre-diabetic conditions because of the changes in your hormones. So stress is very important. One of the things that I think is going to become very important going forward is the ability of a leader to simplify things for their organization and
Yes.
simplify the way work gets done, which means having clear roles and responsibilities, clear processes. And by the way, we don't work for processes, processes have to work for us.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're not going to get into a situation. Otherwise, you'll end up in a situation where you are spinning your wheels, trying to follow the process, and get frustrated because you're not able to get things done. So these are some of the things that a leader needs to watch out for.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And that actually reminds me as well of the previous sessions that we had discussion with around psychological safety. And obviously, right, without having psychological safety, people will not really open up to share their ideas, share their
Yes,
perspective. And one of the good things about diversity and inclusions as well is that it's not just about having like multi-generational, um,
yes,
having those different genders or like different personalities. It's all about actually leveraging on those strengths to create a joyful organization, right?
yes,
And what's interesting about diversity and inclusion is that when you have those ideas and those perspective coming from different uh, people and
hmm,
different personalities, different perspectives, that that actually like creates more um like ideas that you couldn't think
yes,
of, right? And
yes,
also even create more solutions, if
yes,
like everyone is open to
yes,
listening or to
absolutely.
hearing what others has to say, right? Like I remember that story, like one of the leaders I've interviewed about the toothpaste, and someone actually just gave like, why don't you make the hole bigger so that more people can actually use the toothpaste. And it's like a very very simple idea, and yet like nobody have actually thought about that.
Yes,
And it
yes,
was when they tested it, it actually worked quite well. The profitability has increased because of that simple idea.
yes, yes. You're making some great points, by the way, and I do want to just point out a few things. I focus mainly on diversity of opinion, but you
Mhm.
cannot get diversity of opinion by having predominant gender present in your organization. You
True.
cannot do that because they'll end up thinking alike, and there's going to be groupthink, and that is dangerous in this VUCA world. So diversity of opinion is very very important. The second thing is that we have to be respectful of opinions that are different from ours.
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's not that you have to agree with everything,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to allow for respectful discussion
True.
and a consideration of a completely different point of view. The other person or people need to be heard. They need to feel that they are being listened to. You may, at the end of the day, not agree with what is being said, but that's okay. It's important to hear them. Okay, so these are so listening becomes very important. Humility becomes very important. And finally, why is it that everybody is biased? The reason is that we get conditioned by our parents, by our
Mhm.
society, what we got rewarded for, what we didn't get rewarded for, and everybody brings their particular way of doing things and their particular experience to the table. That is what generates bias. And we have to recognize that. We have to recognize that people are biased and recognize that you have to make a conscious effort to look for opinions that are not your opinion, not your cherished held beliefs, because only then can you get a little more into kind of a stress-free environment, be able to deal with this constant change and develop that change resiliency that's required to deal with this environment.
Exactly. And, for us to be able to recognize that as a leader, as a person, what our biases are, like what we got used to or what we were conditioned to
Yes.
believe in, right? Is really important for us to be able to address and to be able to like, oh, it's not really all about this, or this bias of mine is not correct and it doesn't apply in this
Yeah.
organization. I mean, that's actually the unfortunate truth. But I mean, like growing up, it has for sure our parents has like influence on the way we think.
Yes.
People around us would influence us on how we think. Even the environment or the culture within the organization would have like a lot of effect on how we respond as well. And so being able to strengthen your inner work and at the same time being mindful of your biases as well will be really helpful in order to create the culture, the balance, the joy within the organization, right? And while we were actually like discussing about the top three problems, we somehow also like answered the next questions. But if there are anything more that you'd like to add, what would you say? I mean, we don't want to leave them with just the problem. We want to give them like the solutions. And so like part of this is really like recognizing what will be the important leadership capabilities or skills that you must have in order to continue to lead more effectively.
Yes. So some of the leadership skills that you need. One is, of course, leadership skills. You need to
Mhm.
be able to lead, right? A
Yeah.
lot of young people don't have that experience, and so they need to be asking for assignments where they are leading projects, leading teams, and that's how they'll get the experience. The
Mhm.
second thing is communication skills. Your ability to communicate, both to stakeholders above and below.
Mhm.
And third, it's about change management. Dealing with change, the constant change that's happening outside and inside. And finally, taking ownership of your own self development. You have the greatest stake in your own career. So take the trouble to go out there and develop mentors. They don't have to be mentors within your own company, they can be mentors outside. But get that diversity of experience. Learn what to do when you fail, because it's only when you fail that you actually learn,
True.
and that failure actually leads to success. Think big, think big in terms of what you want for your life. And it's funny how things fall in place once you start deciding exactly what you want to do. So these are four or five things that I would think that are important. Also helping your team members, manage their time, making things easy for them, helping them grow and develop is also a key thing. Is a key skill that you have to learn. Delegation, being ability to have the ability to make good decisions, especially under stress.
Mhm.
So these are some of the things that are important from a leadership point of view.
Wow, thank you for sharing that with us. And I really appreciate that, you highlighted again the importance of leadership, communication. I believe like communication is one of the challenges and again potential opportunities for most of us, whether in person or as a professional, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's where like what you've mentioned earlier about the importance of listening as a leader, right?
Yeah.
And this is also something that we have realized a lot, especially in the last years.
Mhm.
There's, you've heard of Clubhouse for sure. And that has actually helped people to listen more
Yeah.
than anything else, right? And of course, change management, which we have also discussed earlier. And most importantly, I mean, we've been like talking around leadership, and part of being able to adapt is being able to actually continue to learn and improve
Yes.
at the same time.
Yes.
And again, like
Absolutely vital. Yeah. Very vital. Otherwise, yeah, you'll stagnate. You know.
exactly. Yeah, and so the next question is generally an invitation on like summarizing what we have been discussing in the last few questions on what do you believe is the role of learning, leadership, and transformation in thriving in the next normal?
Well, as I mentioned, we live in a volatile world where there's a lot of change, and you can't always predict where the change is coming from. So one has to have a couple of things. One is you have to have the ability to learn new things. You also have to have the ability to have resilience so that if you fail, you can get back on track. The finally, if you want to have a significant impact, in your life or create significant impact through your life, then you have to understand that has to happen through other people, and therefore understanding people, guiding them, motivating them, helping them succeed becomes very, very important. Even though we're getting all these technologies, I don't believe AI will replace human beings, because human beings do something very different from what AI does. Human beings are very good at identifying patterns. So it's not like we'll become irrelevant. That's not going to happen. So it's important to understand that you still have to deliver results through people. It is people who develop technologies, it's people who run systems, it's people who make decisions, it's people who show up in meetings, it's people who discuss things with customers, it's people who discuss things with suppliers. So the core of all of this, I think, going forward is going to become much more people centric. Uh, Given all the trends going on, the issues, the stress, etc., etc. So I hope I answered your question.
Definitely, definitely. And I really love what you've shared to wrap up everything. It's really about in the end, it's really about helping others, helping people, right?
Yeah.
And having that customer centricity. And the reason why I said that this is what I like most is because a lot of times like we try to like okay, let's use AI, let's use technology, let's use this or or that, or let's change this, let's do this. And a lot of times the reason why a lot of change management and digitalization do fail is because they forget about the people that they have
Yes,
to
that's
actually
correct.
serve, right?
That's
and
correct.
and I had that conversation in the previous summit that I've organized, where it's really about humanizing how we actually work, how we actually do the transformation to really incorporate that change. And because you need to have the buy-in of the people or your stakeholder even before you implement anything,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day it doesn't matter whether you have technology and you have the capacity software or whatnot in digitalization or digitalizing a lot or automating a lot of your things. If your stakeholders are not ready for it or not gonna use it, then it doesn't make sense. So it's really
Yes.
about, I think, what's like missing out in a lot of the transformations and change management is really failing to be able to communicate ahead of time before you even implement it. It's really about getting the buy-in and the support of
Yes.
everyone. Not necessarily 100%, because I mean,
Yes.
it's kind of it's kind of difficult to achieve that, but then at least those people who are able to influence others, right? Who would agree to that idea or to that transformation would be a good start.
Yeah, and you mentioned a very important thing around technology. It's not a technology success is often not about the technology. It's really about the people. Because if people don't use the technology is not going to work. So it really has to be designed for people to use easily, and it must provide value in their lives. only then people use that technology. Otherwise, people don't use it. People will forget about it. So at that point, I think it's a very important point. People don't use apps because of the technology. They use apps because it's convenient for them. And if it's not convenient for them, they'll stop using them.
Yeah, and similar to your comment why you like Steve Jobs, right? It's
Yeah,
because he
yeah.
simplified a lot of things
He
for us.
simplify. He helped me simplify my life,
Exactly.
to an
Yeah.
extent.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean that's the purpose, right, of a leader, to be able to help others simplify things for them. And anyway, so I really enjoyed this conversation, and I have my two last questions for you, which I would normally call as my Miss Universe questions. So in this case, Mr. Universe questions. So if you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it?
Oh, the first thing is to fix climate change. There's no question about that. That is a threat that's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be very careful with that. Now, if the temperatures rise, the planet is going to be just fine. It's not. It's
Mm-hmm.
us people who will get affected by all of that. Those rising temperatures have a dramatic impact on our lives, on our health, and on the businesses that we will be in, on food security. Some very basic things start to come into play. So it's definitely climate change. In fact, if that's one thing that I could help with, it would be climate change. You know,
Wow,
the
thank
second thing would be environmental pollution. I think we polluted our oceans and seas uh, tremendously, and that's affecting sea life. And we forget that the oceans actually absorb a lot of the pollution.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
True.
just the air pollution; it's also the pollution in our oceans. So that would be my second thing. The third thing would be to get people to realize that they need to take ownership of their own health, and they need to change their lifestyles to get a better life. Because if you have your health, then you have the energy to do the things you want to do. If you don't have health, you don't have it. There's no way you can enjoy life as much as you want to.
Yes, I really agree with you on that. And yeah, as if you have like three wishes that you mentioned to us. So I
Uh,
think that's sorry.
so I hope I answered your question. Is that, yeah? Are you,
Definitely. I mean, that's
okay,
like generally when you say like magic wand, that's also like a very open question, I would say.
right.
And like some of us have like other things. Most of us related to what we are currently doing as well. And this is more of I would say like your three wishes, and it's for everyone, right?
Yeah,
And it's interesting, like you've mentioned around climate change, environment pollution and all those stuff, and it's interesting that how we humans actually like create all these problems as well ourselves.
yes,
So imagine like in our own little ways, I would say that we can actually address it, right? Because I would say that we humans are the ones who actually are the culprits as well, right? The
oh yes,
environment take
absolutely.
care. Yeah, the environment can take care of itself. It's thriving on its own, and
Yeah,
it's us who needs uh to have a good environment for us to be able to live, right? and
yes,
and so like it's also like a reminder, and probably a call to everyone to like be mindful of how they and what they do, right?
yeah,
Whether it's personal or business, like just as simple as throwing your trash outside of your car, or not
yeah,
not being able to recycle,
yes,
reuse, and all those stuff. Those are simple things that we can actually do together to
yes,
and I'm glad that a lot of countries have actually already signed for that zero zero net zero net zero,
yeah,
which is uh, getting rid of carbon and all those stuff, right? Or
yeah,
not necessarily having zero, but I mean minimizing it to a level that will, create again or fix the climate change that we are
Yeah.
undergoing right now. And so that leads me to my last question, which is also a very open question, I would say. If you were to ask yourself a question that you can best answer, what would it be? What question would it be? And since you can best answer it, please do answer it for us.
I'm not sure I have any question that I could answer. The the question that I guess based on my experience, there are I've worked with a lot of young people, and they're very thirsty for learning new skills, and learning, getting knowledge, and converting that into skills. So the question that I would ask the young people is there's going to be a lot of leadership required
Mhm.
in the years to come because of the problems that are coming up for this planet. So the question is, how do you develop those leadership skills? And you develop leadership skills by getting involved. You don't have to have people reporting into you. You could get involved with charity organizations. You could get involved with your passion with what you do. You could get involved even running a home itself requires leadership. So
Exactly.
there's lots of opportunities around you to expand beyond what you're learning at your work. Take advantage of those opportunities, because then you will learn and grow and expand your own skill base.
Yes, very true. I really love your question. And it's a question that everyone has to ask themselves, especially in organization, because a lot of companies rise and fall mainly because of leadership, right? It's a key for us to be able to really succeed in any business, right? In any
Yes,
organization, and so that's how important it is. And again, it's all about developing more leaders within the organization as well,
yes,
because like it doesn't make sense that you have all the C levels and you call them leaders if the rest of the people within your team are not being developed as leaders as well.
absolutely.
So it's really critical, I would say. So I really love this question that you have raised, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you did
Thank
enjoy
you.
as much as I do.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. Those are very interesting questions.
Thank you, thank you. And so with that, is there any like a message, a quote, or anything that you'd like to leave our message before we end this conversation?
Yeah, so I think the when we are young, we don't pay a lot of attention to our health. It's only when you get older that you start getting concerned about these things. But without health, you cannot do anything. If your heart doesn't beat, you're not going to be alive. So it's very important, because I've been, over the years, I've seen, the health of younger people deteriorate quite significantly across the board, across the world. So the message is, look at your lifestyle and please change that so that your health improves. And then you have the energy and the mental capacity to do what you want. Because if you don't, that has significant negative consequences down the road.
Wow, thank you so much for that message and reminder for every one of us to really take charge of our life by taking care of our health as well. And again, that's another silver lining we had in the last few years where we actually realize, or most people realize, how important balance is by taking
Yes,
care of their mind, body, and soul as well. And
yes,
again, like what you've said, you can't do more if you're not healthy enough to live and to um to stay energetic in whatever thing you
yes,
do,
what
right?
you do.
Yeah, so thank you for that reminder, and thank you for this very authentic and inspiring conversation with you, Dr. Alok. And again, thank you everyone for watching us, whether it's live or on a replay. And do join us in this journey to create more opportunities for us to create a better world to live in, right? And remember that even the richest investor in this world would say that investing in yourself is the best investment you can ever make in your life. So, with that, we would like to leave you with this quote that if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Thank you so much again, Dr. Alok, and thank you
Thank you,
everyone for
Marilyn.
watching us. Have a good day and stay
Bye.
safe.
Bye.